Good afternoon. I'm Erica Taylor, Chief of Staff for Charleston County School District, and I want to welcome you to this afternoon's YouTube conversation with Charleston County School District staff members. We appreciate you watching, and we appreciate the questions that you've submitted this far. What we plan to do is we'll go through the questions that we've received via email, and then we'll answer the questions that we receive that you send live during this time today. We're going to get started, and our first question is for Carolyn Belcher, our CAO. The question is, what are the criteria that determine which students return for in-person instruction on September 8th?
Thank you for asking, because I know that's been a little confusing. Some of the criteria that we're using to prioritize students are unique to the academic program of the school. So for example, the School of the Arts is prioritizing our seniors who need to get back in person in order to work for their arts commendation that's tied to graduation. And across the board in elementary, we're prioritizing our youngest CD students to make sure that those students who are best taught in person are in the classroom. And then across the board, some students need to receive services in person, but providing any more information about that would violate these students' privacy. So that's the objective criteria that we refer to. But as we've said, about half of the student population is coming from the objective criteria, and about half will be from a randomized process, so that we're trying to make sure we're serving a diversity of students beginning on September 8th.
Thank you so much for that response, Carolyn. Our next question is, if schools have more students requesting in-person than the school can accept, how does the random selection process work? And I'd like to ask Michelle Simmons, who's our Associate Superintendent for Elementary Schools, to please answer that question.
Sure, thank you, Erica. So some of our schools are easily able to accommodate all in-person preferences. But for those who are not and they have a surplus or more demand than they have capacity to accommodate, as our CAO alluded to a moment ago, they are using roughly half of the seats based on objective criteria. For the remaining half, schools are forwarding the balance of those names to the district office so that a computer-generated and randomized approach can be used to generate the remaining student slots. I would like to take this opportunity, though, to emphasize for our families that we see this as a short-term solution. We fully expect, as the virus incident rate continues to decline, that we'll have an opportunity to introduce more and more students into schools as early as September 21st. About 2 weeks after school starts on the 8th, we'll have an opportunity to reassess and determine that more and more families who prefer to be in person will have that opportunity.
Thank you, Michelle. Our next question is, when will I hear from my child's school about whether my child will be able to attend school in person or temporary remote on September 8th? Dr. Williams, our Associate Superintendent for Secondary Education, can you please answer that question?
Absolutely. So as stated at the board meeting on Monday evening, all schools will be communicating with their families by COB, or close of business, this Friday, which is August 28th, to inform them of the mode that their scholar will be returning in. So with that being said, this will be done through a number of methods. It could be through email, it could be through a notification letter, it may be through the child's schedule, but you can expect that by close of business again on August 28th. So what we would like to state, or what I would like to note, is that for one of our schools, which would be Wando High School, we're gonna have to put those schedules out, our notification letters out on Monday. And reason being is we're kind of working through some of the kinks in the schedules, and we wanna make sure we get a cleaner schedule. So once we do that, which we're expecting to have that done by Monday, those families can expect those notification letters or schedules.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Another question for you, Carolyn. Will you please explain the recent changes made to the virtual academy model?
Yes. As I said in the board meeting on Monday, we received many more families and students proactively registering for the virtual academy than we were expecting. When we completed the enrollment form now 3 weeks ago, we had about 6,000 families express interest. And when we actually had the registration, it was almost 12,000. Now, schools have been able to work through those numbers to contact their families, and we're seeing that number go down. But at that volume, it would have meant that we would have had to reassign teachers from schools, which is what we typically do when we get a lower enrollment at a school than we're expecting and a higher enrollment somewhere else, is that we might move a teacher. In this case, if we did that for Virtual Academy, it would pull too much talent out of the school at a time when we know ultimately we want to be able to serve more students in person. Given that, what we're trying to do is nicely match the Virtual Academy up with their home school so that students will be served by their home school to make sure that counseling and other supports are in place. The idea is at the high school level, Virtual Academy will be similar to temporary remote. The one thing I would call out is that we are going to continue to leverage the South Carolina Virtual and Edgenuity courses, which are asynchronous courses in that program. At the middle school and elementary level, it will also be similar to temporary remote, but where necessary and where we can, we're going to pool resources and use some of these curricular tools that we've got in order to accommodate. As I said on Monday night, our real challenge is that we have smaller class sizes for in-person instruction. So we're trying to meet a smaller class size ratio and serve all of our Virtual Academy and temporary remote, which is stretching our faculty very leanly. So we have to be strategic and problem solve right now. Hopefully, if you continue to do the work that all of you have been doing on the virus, we'll be able to shift to bringing more students back in person very quickly.
Thank you so much for that response. Another question is, what should I do if I signed my child up for Virtual Academy and now would like to change to the remote option to begin the school year? Dr. Williams, can you answer that, please?
Yes, ma'am. So if parents are having a change of heart as it relates to their child being in temporary remote versus Virtual Academy, we would ask that you contact the schools ASAP to let them know of this decision. Now, a lot of parents have been saying that they have not been able to get through because the phone lines have been tied up, but we're asking that you go on the website of the school. You can get the principal's email and email them, but we've also told our principals to be expecting those calls. So if you could get that done by September 8th, then that's how you would go through getting your child changed from Virtual Academy to temporary remote.
Thank you so much. If only 25% of kids are permitted back for in-person learning on September 8th, what specific virus metrics must be met to increase this percentage? Please share specific metrics and what the percent increase to in-person would be. This question I would like to ask our superintendent to answer.
That's a question that's probably on everyone's mind. So I'll start with the metrics. Monday night, our board adopted the metrics that would lead us from our current phase 1 operation with somewhere around 25 to 30% of the students in person to a phase 2 operation, which would serve 50% of our student population in person. I will explain those metrics in just a moment. The important thing I want to stress at this time is that if the board permitted 50% of all of the students enrolled in Charleston County schools to come back in person, as of today, we would be able to serve every single child whose parent has registered them for in-person attendance. So we think we are probably 2 weeks away from being able to announce that we could bring all students back. Here are the metrics. The metrics that we are using can be found on DHEC's website. If you just type into your browser, recent disease activity by county, recent disease activity by county in South Carolina DHEC, you can find this information for yourself. DHEC is suggesting 3 criteria be considered. The first criteria is the number of incident rates per 100,000 population by county. So in each county, they look at the incidence rates for the past 2 weeks, and they say if it's over 200 individuals per 100,000, that's a high incident rate. If it's under 50 individuals per 100,000 population, that's a low incidence rate. Anything between 50 and 200 is a medium incidence rate. Right now, Charleston sits, as of Monday, at 238 people per 100,000. So we are 37 people per 100,000 over the amount that would trigger the opportunity for us to bring back all of the students who have registered in person. The second indicator that DHEC uses is the trend in incidence rate. So are we increasing in incidence? Are we decreasing in incidence? Are we holding steady? In mid-July, our incidence rate was 941 cases per 100,000. As I mentioned, this past Monday, we were at 238 cases per 100,000. So we're on a steadily and sharply declining incident rate. That's a good indicator for Charleston County. The third indicator that DHEC uses is of those people going to get the swab or PCR test in the last 2 weeks, what percentage of those tests was positive? So in Charleston County, 13.8% of the individuals who received those types of tests in the past 2 weeks tested positive. DHEC indicates that, that's a high indicator for that particular criterion. Medium would be under 10% and low would be under 5% of the people who are being tested. So our board developed a rating system. They're using numerical values. Low is 2 points, medium is 1 point, high is 0 points. This follows the red, green, yellow chart that DHEC established precisely. Our board simply assigned number ratios to that. We have to earn 3 points to come back in to bring more children back in person. So we are so very close to the 200 incident rates per 100,000, and our breakout rate's been declining steadily. So we really think that by the time school starts, we probably will be at the 200 or under 200 cases per 100,000 if everyone continues to social distance, wear masks, wash hands, watch personal hygiene, and so forth. Our board indicated that they would give schools a 2-week notice, and that's the reason we think that if the rates continue to decline, that those students who are starting back in person, our board said somewhere around 25%, and the principals at each school can go a little above or below that if they need to, but somewhere around 25% will come back in person for 9 days. And then we think that every other child whose parent has at this point indicated that you want your child to come back in person would be able to send your child back on September 21st. That's certainly what we're hoping for. We can't guarantee it because that's dependent upon the incident rates, but that's where we are. I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to address similar questions as we proceed through. I don't want to take any more time on that, but we'll continue to serve all of the children online whose parents want them to be served online, and we have every reason to be hopeful that by September 21st, we can bring back every child whose parent wants them to return in person. That does mean that we're going to have to reallocate some teachers and change up some classes as we bring more children back.
Thank you for answering that question for us. Our next question, how will temporary remote instruction be evaluated by Ccsd for effectiveness both for teachers and students? What steps are being taken to train students and families on remote teaching platforms? Carolyn, can you answer that question for us, please?
Sure. So I think one of the things that we learned from the spring is that we want to make sure that we have more of an ongoing monitoring process just in general for how we're serving students and providing some professional support for teachers. So in that way, what we're asking is that as teachers are, whether they're teaching in person, temporary remote, virtual academy, the principal and the leadership team at the school has access to the links or the Canvas class that are actually being taught. That would allow the principal or instructional coaches to sign in, observe, do a learning walk like we would do if it was all in person in order to provide feedback and coaching to help folks fine tune their craft. For many of us as educators, this is a new way of teaching and we're adapting, and we want to make sure that we're giving people feedback and an opportunity to learn. We're also, as I think I've said previously, trying to spotlight some of our stronger teachers. So we do have some videos available for teachers around some of our core curricula that teachers can utilize in the classroom so that they can spend most of their time trying to figure out what's holding back this particular child in my class versus how to provide the direct instruction. The second part of the question, Erica, if you wouldn't mind repeating the second part just to make sure I get it.
Not a problem. What steps are being taken to train students and families on remote teaching platforms?
Thank you, Erica. I appreciate it. And the teachers, we have done a lot of professional development beginning back at the end of June around our LMS system, which is Canvas. That's the online tool through which all courses will go through. Practices and resources related to what does it look like just to be a good virtual instructor. For parents, we're building out a website that will give similar resources so that you know how to help your child sign into Canvas. We're also hoping for some support from our public libraries and other community organizations to help facilitate some of the basic things around just computer access. This is a time where it's not that easy to jump between multiple applications. We're trying to make sure for families there's a one-stop shop, but we recognize that still folks might need help troubleshooting. So we're going to leverage those resources, and there should be a website connected to learning services on the Ccsd website.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Our next question is for Jeff, who's our Chief Operating Officer. The question is, what will happen if conditions related to the spread of COVID-19 get worse after students return for in-person instruction? It's a two-part question, and the second part, which I'll share now and can repeat, will schools have to accept fewer students or eventually move to all online or virtual instruction? Mr. Barowie?
Thanks, Erica.
No problem.
So two answers I'd like to provide on that question. One is an increase in the number of cases or a significant number of cases within within a current school. If that's the case, we'll be looking at that school on a case-by-case basis, working with our medical professionals at DHEC to determine whether or not an entire classroom, an entire wing needs to be closed before we decide to close an entire school. So on a school-by-school basis, we'll be looking at cases from that perspective. The second possible COVID spread is within the community. So the rates that Dr. Postaway just mentioned, whether it be the incident rate or the positivity rate, we don't intend to go back on the numbers right away. We'll certainly take a close look at the changes in those numbers. And again, as in the previous situation, work with DHEC and in this case, MUSC to see if it's recommended that we move in the other direction. But initially we wouldn't, we would stay the course as long as we believed it was still to be safe in our schools.
Thank you so much. The next question is about leap days. What's happening during leap days next week? And the parent asked, does my child have to be there in person? Ms. Simmons, can you answer that question?
Sure. I'll start with the latter portion of the question. We absolutely encourage and implore our families to please participate in person, face-to-face. It's just really important for the school team to have a handle on who they're serving, just so we can make the initial connections, forge those relationships, and understand who's the advocate for the child at the home. And so I would implore everyone to really participate face-to-face, but please be on time for your scheduled appointments so that the school teams can adhere to our safety protocols. But what families can expect, generally speaking, from leap days would be a variety of activities that include but are not limited to some diagnostic testing for our boys and girls. They will have opportunities for meet the teacher, orientations to some of the platforms that Ms. Belcher alluded to a moment ago, and just some overall getting to know what you can expect from the school year, a school week, and just an opportunity to make that initial face-to-face contact with your school teams. And so it's really important for those families to take part next week.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Our next question is for our General Counsel, Ms. Natalie Ham, and that question is, what is the requirement for face coverings, and are there any exemptions?
Thank you, Erica. So face coverings, what is required are face masks or face coverings that are made of cloth or fabric that cover the nose, the mouth, and the chin, and that have straps that go around the ear, either with an elastic or a tie. More importantly, what is not acceptable at our schools and offices are neck scarves, bandanas, gaiters, and masks with exhalation valves or vents. Those are not acceptable pursuant to DHEC and MUSC guidelines, and they shall not be used. Additionally, that you may have seen face shields, which are plastic face coverings that cover the face but do not have the earpieces. Those are only acceptable with approval by the district without an actual face covering, a cloth face covering. So you would need to have both of them if you opted to wear a face shield.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Dr. Joe, what does a typical day look like for remote learning?
So as we've been saying a lot, our remote learning experience will be a lot different than it was in the spring, in that for our elementary and middle school scholars, they will have that face-to-face remote time with the teacher for their core content subjects to include the ELA, the math, the science, and the social studies daily. In addition, they will have a minimum of one related arts class. That's like your art, your music, etc. And also for our high schools, they will have that remote face-to-face time with the teachers that are on their schedule. The one thing that we would like to stress is that, yes, scholars will have some independent work that they have to complete outside of those remote face-to-face settings. But the good thing is that if a scholar does struggle, with some of that independent work, the next day, they will have an opportunity to see those teachers and ask any questions for clarification during that face-to-face remote time. So that's one of the biggest things that we'd like to offer. And if you wanted clarification on the difference between the remote and the virtual academy, that's it. They will get more time with the teacher for that face-to-face remote time than they would with a virtual, where it's not as much time for that to occur.
Thank you so much for that response. Next question, is Virtual Academy providing both asynchronous and synchronous learning content? And I'd like Carolyn to answer that question.
It is, particularly at the middle school and high school. So at those levels, it's developmentally appropriate to be able to do the work more independent. For our elementary schools, we did want to make sure that we had more structure. So while there will be some live instruction time and then some independent work.
Thank you so much. Our next question is, are the waiting lists for magnet schools still moving? If a waitlisted student is offered a seat after school begins, will they be able to immediately transfer into their new school? Carolyn, can you answer that one as well?
I can.
Thank you.
So over the course of the summer, the magnet schools were doing what they typically do, which is as some students let the school know that they're not going to be accepting the position, they've been moving students. More recently, as we get ready for schools and opening and making sure that we have the right schedules, I do think the magnet list has been on pause because we're waiting to see which students actually show up. So I know some families might know a particular neighbor or friend has decided not to go to a particular magnet school so that position may be opened up. Our expectation is that those lists will start moving again once school opens, so the principals are able to see who's actually coming for in-person, who's coming for temporary remote, and where do I have opportunities to accept more students. So that will happen, and when that happens, a student can transfer very quickly, as is best for the family to make that happen.
Thank you so much for that response. Ms. Simmons, how will children be disciplined if they are not wearing their masks in school and on school grounds?
Very well. So first and foremost, we are a teaching and learning organization. So we will do our part to show care in redirecting, reminding, teaching expectations, and modeling for our boys and girls because we want to show them what is expected initially. And so we follow a regular progression of consequences. So our Department of Alternative Programs, they have revised the progressive discipline plan for this particular season that we find ourselves in. And so while we will do our due diligence to reteach expectations, there may come occasions where we need to get parents involved for their support. And if all else fails and we get to the point where a temporary removal from a setting is required because of the sensitive nature of this virus and the impact that bad choices can have on others, we do at a point expect families to support us and making sure that our students are able to follow through on expectations. And so we'll follow a typical discipline protocol, but our boys and girls will be expected to follow through on wearing their masks on a daily basis.
Thank you so much. Our next question, is a bell schedule for all schools posted? Mr. Barrowe, can you answer that question for me?
Yes, I can. So the bell schedule is posted under the transportation link on our website. We also, I want to point out, have the bus route schedules posted at that link as well. I encourage parents to look at both from a transportation route perspective. If you see bus stops on there that don't match up with your address, please provide that feedback to transportation. And there's a link on our website for you to submit that electronically. That helps us modify the routes and begin to modify the routes even before school begins. Going back to the bell schedule, I do want to point out that the Board of Trustees has approved early dismissal the first 2 days of school, the 8th and the 9th. That those early dismissal schedules or times are on that bell schedule. The exact times are on that bell schedule. So just a reminder of those two changes from the start of the school year.
Thank you so much. Another question, what does the communication process look like for positive COVID-19 tests for students and staff at school? And it's a two-parter. And the second part is, will parents know about every case associated with their child's school?
So for COVID positive, I want to take a second to just remind parents and make them feel comfortable with the fact that we have an incredible nursing department that has been doing contact tracing for months now. And we've got a very good turnaround on that process. And that's probably the most important aspect of the notification process, because as they identify those that are close contacts, they can immediately contact those individuals and let them know that they're quarantined. And that reduces the possibility that there's more of an influence, a negative influence of that positive case. So that's something that's really, that we're very proud of and very happy and very pleased that we're ready to go on that front. As far as the notification process behind close contacts and what information is going to be made available, we've anxiously awaited DHEC's direction. The governor has directed DHEC to publish the numbers of COVID positive cases at schools, and we want to make sure that our information is going to be aligned with DHEC's information. We've gotten some of that feedback today. We will, before school starts, have that fully laid out so that parents know how that contact will be made and where they can go to get further information related to those that have been determined to be COVID positive in their child's school.
Thank you, Jeff. And just one more. When will schools have their plexiglass dividers in place?
So we've been living plexiglass dividers for some time now, to the tune of, if it's laid end to end, 4 foot high, 24 miles. That represents a lot of work that has to be done and still needs to be done. Our focus has been elementary school, general education classrooms. We will have all of those done by early Monday morning. So before Leap Week, our elementary schools will be complete. That moves on to middle and high. For the middle schools that need them, we hope to have those done by Monday as well. In high schools, the week that school starts. So the Monday that children come into school on the first day of school, those dividers will be done. I also want to point out that we're preparing L-shaped individual partitions for teachers so that they can put that portable partition on their desk so they can meet with a student and another faculty member closer than 6 foot, still wearing their mask, but closer than 6 foot. And they can move that partition around with them through the school if they have meetings or small group conferences in the school building.
Thank you so much, Jeff. A question for our Chief Financial and Administrative Officer, Don Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, how much CARES Act funding did the district receive and how is it being used?
Thank you very much. So the CARES funding is the additional funding that school districts will receive from the federal government for additional costs that we will incur for safe school reopening. The district has not received this CARES funding yet, but we do expect to receive $13.4 million sometime within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So 13.4. I will point out though that our total cost for school reopening due to COVID will far exceed that amount. As of last Friday, that amount was that we estimated as $18.7 million, and we still expect additional costs to come in. Of that 18.7, I'll give you some examples of how it's being spent. A significant portion, roughly $9.5 million, is for the safety measures and protocols that Mr. Burr already talked about, the plexiglass. In addition to that, the filtration systems and heating and air conditioning systems, PPE, the personal protective equipment. On the academic side, for virtual academy, there are costs there. There are costs for special needs children to support their needs, costs for guidance counselors, et cetera. And then in addition to that, we have approximately $1 million that's been allocated out to the private schools.
Thank you so much for that response. A question about teacher vacancies. How many classroom teacher vacancies do we have? And I'd like to ask Mr. Bill Bergman, our Chief Human Resources Officer, to respond to that question.
Thank you, Erica. Well, I'm excited to announce and welcome 513 as of today new teachers to Charleston County School District. So we're very excited about that. It's kicking off the school year in the right way with the number of teachers that we've hired. We still have about 17 classroom vacancies to fill, which is common at this time of year. We're still actively recruiting. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have another question for you. How will substitutes fill in this year? It's a two-parter. And what's the district's process for assigning substitute teachers in the classroom?
Thank you, Erica. I think I can answer both pretty quickly. So going into this year, into the fall, each school will have a permanent building level sub or substitute teachers assigned to their schools. We work with Kelly Educational Services for substitute teachers. We currently have 355 substitute teachers through Kelly Educational Services who've committed to come back into buildings when we open buildings for face-to-face instruction. We need 220 subs to actually accommodate our plan. So we feel really good about where we are. So subs, again, will be assigned to a building. We will not have substitute teachers rotating across the district. So I feel very comfortable with that plan. The school-based sub will be basically part of the school staff. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Ms. Simmons, and this is coming from the chat. What will the classroom look like for early childhood? Will children be required to stay in their seats the entire day? Will they have circle time centers? Can you share with us what parents can expect?
Yeah, sure. Good question. So for our littlest learners, we don't expect them to be seated all day. That's unreasonable. But for 4K in particular, we've designed classroom sizes to be a good bit smaller than they typically would for the purpose of social distancing and adhering to our safety protocols. But we can expect the normal activity and movement in the classroom, just with more layers of supervision and smaller groups. So whereas you may have a group of 5 or 6 at a typical circle time or story time, for this particular environment, you would have fewer children, maybe 2 to 3, where the teacher can have a handle on what's going on in that circle time. And so you can expect the traditional, typical approaches to teaching and learning, just with more safety protocols. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Williams, will siblings be given the same model for learning?
As far as the same mode, we can't confirm or say that each school, like we said earlier, is unique, and it would depend on the amount of spaces that a school has to serve a scholar in person, for instance. So each school, since it's different and unique, we cannot promise to say that every scholar or sibling would have the same learning mode.
Thank you so much for answering that question. A question for Mr. Barowie. Once school opens, will students have their temperature taken with no-touch thermometers?
So as of right now, the Center for Disease Control and the State Department of Health and Environmental Control are not recommending that temperatures be taken. So our plan right now is not to do that. We're very concerned with the lines that would be formed to get those temperatures done in a timely manner. I myself, having the touchless thermometer done, I have to do mine 3 or 4 times before it'll actually pick up the correct temperature. And so we will just be checking temperatures of those individuals those children that exhibit any type of symptoms. We still strongly will recommend parents to check their children's temperatures before they come into school. But as far as school goes, we won't be doing those on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you so much. Another question from Maria M. When will the next phase of children be selected to go back in person after September 8th, or how will they be selected? Carolyn, do you want to take that one for me?
Our hope is that if, as Dr. Postaway has highlighted, that the virus levels go down, that we'll be able to admit more students because our DHEC metrics will fall within that yellow range overall, as we've talked through earlier this evening. If that happens, our hope is we'll be able to bring back all students who are interested in in-person instruction. There may be some schools that will have to have an alternating schedule given limitations of the safe COVID space at a particular building, but we'll deal with those on a case-by-case basis. So our hope is that we're 2 weeks away from that, but again, we need the community to continue to do the hard work that they've already been doing around those 4 W's of wearing a mask, making sure that you're staying 6 feet away from each other, not touching your face, and washing your hands.
Thank you so much for that. I have a question about athletics, Jeff. Can you provide an update? And when do practices start? When do competitions start? And how can parents watching find out more?
So as it stands today, we've got all but competitive cheer and football in actual practice. They are in conditioning. The other sports have begun practice already. Those first 2, competitive cheer and football, will begin practice next week. Games will begin as scheduled. We're working out the details now on attendance at those games. We certainly want to maintain social distancing and the COVID safety protocols that we're implementing throughout our campuses. There'll be more information to follow on who can attend and how many people can actually attend each game. But everything as it stands right now is on track.
Thank you so much. I have a question from the chat from Lacey W. Are the beginning and ending times of the daily temporary remote schedule determined by individual schools, or will they be the same across the school district? Joe, can you answer that for me?
Yes, that's a pretty simple answer. Each school would have to determine what the start times are and end times.
Thank you so much. A question for you, Jeff. Do teachers have ample PPE, mask, wipes, sanitizer? Are schools paying for this, or do teachers have to pay for this?
So neither teachers nor schools have to pay for PPE unless they need or want more than what is being provided. We wouldn't stop them from doing that. But I fully believe that by the start of the school year, we will have the equipment and cleaning supplies available. To give you a quick snapshot of where we stand right now, we've got masks that have been delivered for the teachers. Those were state provided. We have district provided masks that will be delivered to the schools this week. From a face shield perspective, Natalie mentioned the protocols behind wearing face shields. Each teacher will have a district provided face shield. Each classroom already has a bottle of disinfectant. We're not handing out disinfectant wipes, but we're using the disinfectant spray that is used district-wide. Every classroom has those. Hand sanitizer, we've got that distributed to each of the schools. Each teacher, each faculty member is expected to fill the bottles that they have in their classroom on their own, but there'll be plenty available for refill within the space. Disposable items like disposable masks, disposable gloves, we have those at the ready. Each school can request additional supplies of those as they need it. So the bottom line is we're very comfortable with teacher PPE, school PPE. In addition to that, we will be providing our children masks as well. Those are being delivered to the schools this week. And for the first 25% that are in the schools, we'll be ready to issue those in time for school to start.
Thank you so much. We have another question about after-school care, and the question is, when will we know if after-school care will be provided for students who are receiving in-person instruction? Ms. Simmons, can you answer that?
Sure. So our expanded learning division operates our kaleidoscope programming, and they are tentatively expecting to be able to stand up and operate the program for after-school students and before care students, tentatively scheduled for September 14. The individual school locations will have more information about that very soon, but that's a tentative date and plan for supporting our families.
Thank you so much. Another question from the chat from Kelly G. Why was the hybrid model removed at the last minute? We were never asked in the surveys if we preferred hybrid or 100% online. 2 days is better than 0 and accommodates more children. Dr. Postlewaite, can you take that one?
I can. I was looking at the questions and making myself some notes to get to those you might not reach. The reason we abandoned AB is that as the COVID-19 rates began to come down, we saw that we are going to very quickly be able to bring back all of the children who want to come back in person. So the first 2 weeks of school, we will have a small group. Our board voted for somewhere around 25%, with principals having the ability to adjust that a bit either way. The first 2 weeks we'll use to ensure we have the protocols in place, that the procedures are working. And as they're doing that, principals will be ready to bring back all of the rest of the students who want to come back in person 5 days a week. So if we had implemented an AB type schedule, it would have been implemented for such a short time that it would have been more disruptive than not. And this lets us make sure we have the protocols in place and that they're working. I will also mention that we're watching in almost real time the enrollment requests of parents. And there is no school that at this point in time cannot serve in their school all of the students who wish to come back in person. There's great variation among schools in the district. I'll give you an example of a school that has a seating capacity of over 800 students. Only 20 want to come back in person. So many of our students are bringing back now all the children who can come back in person. For those that cannot, again, we are very hopeful that within 2 weeks, 9 instructional days of the school year starting, that we'll be able to bring everyone back.
Thank you for that response. Jeff, I have a question about meals. How will meals be served to students who are in the virtual academy or temporary remote?
So on Monday of this coming week, a registration form will be emailed to parents that are remote or virtual. It'll give them a chance to register in picking up meals. If they're in a CEP school, free and reduced, those meals would obviously be free. Parents will be given a choice to pick up daily meals or to pick up a week's worth of meals on Monday. If the parent has children in more than one school, they'll be able to pick the school that they want to go to pick up those meals. For those that aren't on free and reduced or a CEP, we will offer the meals at a very low rate. It's $2.25 per lunch, which is very economical. That'll be part of the registration form, so that if parents want to pay for meals, they have that opportunity as well.
Thank you so much. I have a question from Joy M. What's the process for having a child with special needs reassigned to in-person class rooms? Carolyn, can you answer that for me?
Erica, can you repeat the question, please? I missed the beginning. Forgive me.
What's the process for having a child with special needs reassigned to in-person classrooms or assigned to in-person class?
It very much depends on what your child's special need may be and what accommodation is required in order to make sure that we're meeting the individual education plan goals or a 504 plan goal. So some IEPs are very clear that there's a particular setting that's required. Some IEPs are not. And so in a situation like, for example, speech and language pathology, I think it's possible to be in compliance with an IEP without necessarily being in person. So I think that if you have a question about whether the setting is appropriate for your child, the best person to go to would be the special educator at your school to reconvene the IEP team.
Thank you so much. I have another question. The question is, if an in-person instruction child gets sick, can they easily switch into temporary remote? Carolyn, can you answer that one as well?
Yes, as long as they're still able, obviously, to participate in classes and complete homework and are not ill, they can still participate in temporary remote and would be marked as present.
Thank you so much. I have another question. Will students who are learning through the virtual academy or temporary remote be required to report to schools for in-person check-ins throughout the year? Dr. Williams, can you answer that one for me?
Absolutely. While it's not a requirement, it would, again, depend on what schools would want to do. We are asking parents if schools have it in their schedules to do so, that you could comply if you can safely. So basically what we're saying in a nutshell is that it's not a requirement that we do check-ins throughout the year, but we are asking that if you do get an invite from the school to do so, that if you could support us in that effort, that would be amazing.
Thank you so much.
Can I just add one little thing on that? I think one concern that we have from us this spring is just making sure that we know where all kids are and that we're ensuring that they're safe. So I think we would want to do in person. That's why the LEAP is so important, and want to make sure that we're seeing all kids through the camera. So I think one key priority is to make sure that we know where all children are and that they're safe and getting what they need. So please know that we may ask you to bring a child in because we want to make sure we know what's going on.
Thank you for that. And then just to add to that, we have another question, and it says, will there be flexibility in the schedules for those temporary remote and virtual academy students whose parents work during the day? So flexibility in their school time. Carolyn, can you answer that one as well?
At this point, there will be only if your child is a middle school or high school student taking asynchronous courses. Otherwise, we're trying very hard to stay consistent across the mediums with a sort of traditional bell schedule and traditional day of school.
Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
And one thing that, if I could reiterate to our parents, is that if your child is temporary remote, like I stated earlier, there will be that remote face-to-face interaction with the teacher daily. So, they will have that teacher there. And like I said, when they're doing that independent work, if they struggle with that while they're doing it the next day, if it's a weekday, of course, in a school day, they will have that opportunity again to have that face-to-face remote time with the teacher to offer some clarity, receive some support. So.
Thank you for adding that, Dr. Williams.
Thank you so much to you both. The next question is about hotspots. Will hotspots or MiFis be loaned to our ESOL families who are not approved for free internet services in the spring, if they are remote or virtual? And even if virtual, is let me repeat that question. Will hotspots or MiFis be loaned to our ESOL families who are not approved for the free internet services that were offered in the spring, whether it's temporary, remote, or virtual? Jeff, can you answer that question?
Yes, Erica. So we'll be looking at cases like that on an individual basis, but I do want to point out two things. One of the initiatives that our information technology team is looking at is identifying communities that don't qualify for free hotspots to create an antenna situation where they can get MiFi, Wi-Fi in their neighborhoods. And so we're looking at some of the more populated neighborhoods in our ESOL dominant areas. And we're also working with our service providers to provide better coverage in the more rural areas. That said, again, on a school case-by-case basis, we'll take a look at the need of our children and see what we can do.
Thank you so much. I have another question, and the question is, when will the dashboard be available on the CCSD website?
So we'll have the dashboard in place before the school year starts. We're determining right now what we're going to put on the dashboard. We want to make sure that it's information that is current, helpful, and is something that is repetitive, something that we can keep up. We certainly don't want to fall behind on the information being provided. So before school starts, the dashboard will be up and running.
Thank you so much. A question for Ms. Simmons. Are teachers expected to teach in person and virtually on the same day?
So we don't expect that to be a wholesale practice. I've talked with lots of principals about creative scheduling. There are some grade levels in some buildings who have asked and prefer to take a team approach to how they deliver instruction. So it may be an AM, PM schedule where some teachers are teaching face-to-face in the morning and then they have a remote cohort or group of children in the afternoon. Now, that's not standard, that's not applicable to all schools, but on occasion, there may be school teams and grade levels who choose a particular approach as such.
Thank you so much. I have another question about capacity. The question is, who determined the 25% capacity, and why was the target, and what was it based on?
So I could answer that. I think that when the board had to make a call, at some point in the game, you have to make a call. And at the end of July, the board had to make some call about whether we could bring any children back in person. As I've already mentioned, and as everyone knows, our rates in July, the COVID outbreak rates, were much higher than they are now. But by the end of July, our board could see that they were beginning to come down fairly substantially. So the board felt that a safe space to start would be to say, let's open the year, let's plan to open the year with 25% of our students coming back in person. If that goes well, then let's quickly phase in more students. So it's an imperfect science with constantly changing conditions. That was a way that our board felt at the end of July would be a safe target. By August 10th, our board saw that there was even a further decline in COVID-19 rates. And on August 10th, our board gave every school permission to vary from that 25% the best they could, given the time they had left in which to make plans before students came back. So that's generally how we arrived at the 25%. And now, of course, we know that we hope, I should say, that the COVID rates are coming down enough that within 2 weeks of the beginning of the school year, we will be able to serve 100% of the students who want to come back in person.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Postlewaite. A question about transportation, Jeff, and the question is, if we are approved for in-person, what is the status of bus transportation? Will every child for in-person have bus transportation?
So the simple answer to that is absolutely yes. We're very confident in our status right now related to bus transportation. We have enough buses, we have enough drivers, and we only have roughly 25% of the students coming back. And I suspect that a portion of them will be dropped off by their parents. So with a 67% bus capacity maximum from the Department of Health and Environmental Control, we feel very confident that we'll have a seat for every child on the bus. As we begin to bring more students into school, we will be moving toward assigned seats, bus passes, to make sure that we can maintain the social distancing that we begin the school year with. So bottom line is, we're very comfortable in our process. We're very comfortable and very confident that our bus efficiency and effectiveness will be better than it was last year.
Thank you so much.
Erica, if I could just add to that, it might help put in context for everyone if we explain that as of a couple of hours ago, we have 17,600 students whose parents want them to come back in person. That's out of a normal enrollment of 48 to 50,000 students. So we have 17,600 who want them to come back in person. We have 16,000 some who want their children to start the school year by learning online. So obviously we have 10 or 12,000 parents that we have not been able to get a commitment from yet. But even with all of the in-person numbers that we have, and if we assume 50% more of the students who haven't registered want to come back, we have capacity in the school and on the buses, and that's why we're answering so confidently today. And those answers could change if our predictions about the parents we have not yet heard from are extremely different from the trends that we see so far.
Thank you. And just one follow-up, is there going to be a specific policy for students riding the bus?
Well, the key policy will be that we require students to wear masks. If students don't have a mask when they show up at the bus stop, we'll have disposable masks available to issue to a child. If they continue to refuse to wear the mask, we'll report that back to the school. And as Ms. Simmons mentioned earlier, that'll follow the disciplinary plan for the school, working to try to change the situation to where the child will want to wear a mask and involve parents where necessary. So the mask is probably the biggest change that we'll see in the buses this year.
Thank you so much. A few questions have come through just about whether or not families who are saying that they don't want to go back to in-person instruction, so that they would prefer to continue with virtual academy or temporary remote. Carolyn, can you just share what you've already shared before about transferring between temporary remote, virtual to temporary remote and or in-person?
We want to make sure that any family that doesn't feel comfortable with in-person instruction this year can count on the fact that there will be a remote option throughout the entire school year. In general, when we're going to ask to move families at natural on-ramps and off-ramps of when an academic period ends at the end of the quarter or the end of the semester. Now, especially early on, as we've already discussed, if our virus rates keep going in the right direction and we are able to bring back more students in person in those first 2 weeks, we would move very quickly to do that based again on family preference. But the sense is the intent of the question is, if I want my child to be in a virtual and I'm worried about in person, you don't need to worry. We will have that option all year.
Thank you so much for answering that question. For Dr. Williams or Ms. Simmons, we've received 2 emails from parents wanting to know what the first day of school may look like this year.
Different. So of course it's going to look different, and mainly because we're going to have scholars being served in 3 different modes. You know, we're going to have those that have signed up for virtual academy. We're going to have those assigned to temporary remote, and we're going to have a small population of our kiddos in person for in-person instruction. So the first day will be walking into a building and seeing some teachers in the classroom by themselves, but yet they're talking to themselves. And we have to realize that they're not crazy or not insane, but they're actually teaching remotely. But we'll walk by some classrooms and see some scholars that are in person, and just supporting scholars and families the best way we can safely is what we expect to see on the first day. I would like to say, I think we're going to see some of the same things as well, even though it's going to be different, where we're going to see a lot of teachers, a lot of administrators that are excited. We're going to see kids that are excited, be it in person or remotely. So while we will see some things that are way different from what we've seen in the past, I expect to see some things that are usual, which is the positive energy that we get when it comes to serving our kiddos in Ccsd.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. He keeps the life among us, keeps it light for us. And I'll just add on that the board did pass on Monday that our very first 2 days of the school year will be early release days. So parents, you can expect an early release day, Monday and Tuesday when we return, just for the purpose of making sure that Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Those very first 2 days of the school year will be early release days, just for the purpose of making sure that everyone is adhering to safety protocols, that checks and balances are in place, and that our school teams can regroup and monitor and adjust accordingly.
Thank you. And as we get ready to close this session, I'd like to ask our superintendent, Dr. Postlewaite, to close us out. But thank you for being an attentive audience and for submitting your questions and for caring about teachers and our students. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate everyone who joined in today. And I want to end by thanking the staff. As you heard, the team members who are here all work really hard and can immediately respond to their areas, to questions in their areas of expertise. In addition to those who are participating here, though, we have thousands of team members out in schools, the principals and office staffs, teachers and other staff members who are working really hard to respond as quickly as we can to your questions and concerns, to get children scheduled, and then to get ready to shift those schedules in a couple of weeks that we hope will result in our being able to bring back all of the students whose parents want them to come back in person. You've asked some questions about the metrics and where they came from, who chose them. Do the metrics that I quoted include just the age 5 through 18 population? And the answer is those metrics represent everyone who lives in Charleston County, who gave an address in Charleston County when he or she when they were tested. Again, you can see the metrics for yourself. If you go into the browser, put SC DHEC, DHEC, and then type in percent disease activity by county or recent disease activity by county, and you'll be able to see county by county the exact metrics to which we were referring. We are really excited about the start of a new school year, despite the fact that we're trying to hold school in the midst of a pandemic. And there are a lot of uncertainties. We can't wait for students to be back with us, whether it's online or in person. We thank you for being patient with us. We understand your frustration. We understand that it feels as though it's more chaotic than it ought to be. It's more complex than it seems as though it would be. So thank you again for those of you who've shown us grace and patience. Prayerfully, we hope that all the plans we've put in place will work really well. We are ready to welcome you and your children back into school or online with us. And in the meantime, we hope everyone will observe the 4 W's and emphasize to your children as they come back to school to remember the 4 W's, to wear your mask, to wash your hands frequently, to watch your distance, and whoa, don't touch your face. Thank you again for joining us this evening. We wish you the very best of a happy new year with Charleston County Schools. Good evening.